Welcome to Doctor on Call with your host, DocGriffon. The doctor will be with you momentarily. Our guest this evening is independent professional wrestler and promoter Maniac Mark Mustang. The following interview is conducted in a safe environment and executed by highly trained professionals. Any attempts to copy the superstars and divas moves in the ring are extremely dangerous and irresponsible. Please do not try this at home. DocGriffon, paging DocGriffon, you're needed in the OR. Stat.
And thank you, Nurse Wicked. And welcome to everybody who's out watching right now. Tonight, of course, we were supposed to have a New York piano bar singer in. But unfortunately, she chose to do a vacation in a place where storms knocked out everything. So we've got something a little bit better for you, maybe even cuter. I do count this person as a friend of mine, but he has an extensive background in professional wrestling, not only in wrestling, running territories, and of course he also has trained people to become wrestlers. So I am happy to welcome onto the show this evening Maniac Mark Mustang. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, Doc. I'm glad to be
we're
here.
glad to have you here.
It's always glad to be somewhere.
Yeah. I'm getting a little echo.
Your nurse sounds kind of sexy there too, by the way.
She is,
but we won't talk about that.
She is, without a doubt. Now, of course, I always like to start at the very beginning. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Chillicothe, Ohio, and raised in Waynesville, Ohio.
Oh, okay. Isn't that Bobby Fulton's hometown, Chillicothe?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when I was a kid, growing up and watching wrestling, I know Bobby would kill me for saying this because, he's probably, 7-8 years older than me, but I used to kind of idolize him just for the simple fact that, we kind of have that connection, with, him being from Chillicothe and me being born there. So I don't know if that's an actual connection, but, it is what it is.
It's something to start the conversation.
Right. Absolutely. We, over the years, many times I've worked with Bobby, but we'll get into that later.
Now, when you're growing up, what kind of kid were you?
I was a little short, fat, mean kid. I was always into something. Me and my other two brothers at the time. I know that my parents probably had to have. They probably had to buy stock in the local grocery store, and I know about once a year my parents got new furniture because of me and my brothers. It was like we would, as kids back then, and we were watching. It was Memphis wrestling. My brother would act like he was Jerry Lawler. I'd act like I was the Dream Machine, and and we would go through couches, love seats, chairs, backdropping each other in the hallway. That's the fact. It was just that's just how we did. It was back then we didn't have video games to play or any of that stuff. It was all about. It seemed like for me it was all about the wrestling.
So.
And I probably started
you had
watching.
Brothers, were you youngest, oldest, middle?
I was second. I'm actually second of four. So I guess that would make me middle then, I guess, or close to middle, whichever, close enough. So it's like none of my other brothers had any desire to do any wrestling. One of my brothers, a little younger than me, he actually managed me on a few shows in the early days of Unified Championship Wrestling. Me doing a nut gimmick, he would do he would come out dressed just like I was, but he never did anything in the ring.
Were you much of an organized sports person when you were growing up?
Well, the thing is, I think when I was growing up, I was really into baseball when I was young. Actually, I was quite a baseball player, if I do say so myself, and I ended up. I'll tell you the story, as stupid as it sounds. We were putting a swimming pool up one year, and we were leveling off the ground and had to remove some of the grass. And of course, I'm an idiot. I'm out there with no shoes on. And my oldest brother, who I say to this day he did it intentionally because I'm better looking than him, but he stuck the shovel went through the dirt, through the grass, and through my heel. And I ended up with like 31 stitches on my heel. And honestly, at that time in my life, I was probably around 12 years old, I think. And that was back when they had a traveling team, like an all-star team. And the guy that coached the all-star team had been my coach for all them years. So I made the team without even trying out. But I had to, once I healed up, I went to try to go back to playing baseball, and I just didn't have it anymore. And that's when I really decided that, hey, I want to turn to wrestling. And, so I started watching that. But while I was in high school, I didn't play football because for the simple fact I used to tell people too tough to play football. So I wasn't going to do that, or it wasn't tough enough. And then, it was, I think when I was a freshman year, I was the MVP of the track team. I mean, what other school has a 300-pound guy as their MVP on their track team? Yeah, that's kind of unusual. Of course, the truth be told, I threw shot put and discus.
Well,
and
we kind of lost you.
The whole team.
Yep.
Can you hear me now? Let me get back to Central here. You got me? Yep. Okay. What part did you lose me on?
I don't know. I just kind of blanked out. It almost sounded like the phone got sat down for a second.
Well, what I was saying is, I guess in high school when I was a freshman, as far as organized sports, I didn't play football. My brother was a big football star, so I figured I'd let him have that. I didn't want to show him up. And so as a freshman, I was MVP on the track team as a freshman, which is kind of unheard of. Like I was saying, the truth be told, I was a shot putter and a discus thrower. And I guess the only reason I probably got MVP as a freshman was because there were only four guys on the whole team. So we, we couldn't do any relays. We couldn't do anything. I think three of the four guys were shot putters, and we had one distance runner, and that was it. But so like I said earlier, I was always into baseball. I enjoyed track. Didn't give a crap about football. Even NFL today, I like to watch a little bit of football, as long as it's not the Saints.
Hey,
but I know that little inside secret about you, so I had to touch that nerve. But it was also when it was kind of weird when I was in high school. We also had a powerlifting team. It was kind of a new thing that had started back then, probably around 84, probably something like that, 85. And I managed to get 10th in the state in powerlifting in the heavyweight division, and I would have placed a lot higher, but supposedly on a couple bench presses, I lifted my foot like an inch off the floor, and they disqualified me on my last two lifts. So if those lifts would have been counted as good, which I felt that they should have been, I'd have probably been. I don't think I would have been number one, but I'd have been around 2 or 3.
That's a rule?
So,
that's weird.
Yeah, your feet have to stay planted, and you've probably seen guys in the gym before that
And we're back. I do apologize to the chat because, of course, I spent the whole day yesterday trying to fix this thing, and I thought we had it fixed. We ran tests on it all night until the early morning, but apparently that's not the case, so we will keep it going.
Like I was saying, as far as the weightlifting goes, it's like their rules are really, really strict. You have to keep both feet planted, and you can't lift your feet at all, not even a little bit. If they see any movement, they disqualify you. And also, I'm sure you've seen guys in the gym that will arch their back when they lift. During the state competition I was in, they actually had to take guys that were known to do that and put a weightlifting belt around them and strap them to the bench itself to prevent them from doing that. But you're not allowed to do that either. It's really strict, But yet they would let you, like as far as like doing a squat. I seen a guy literally they set this guy down on the bench and made him stretch his legs out, and they wrapped his legs as tight as he could, his knees, to give it more protection for his knees, and it actually helps in the strength. That they had to literally like pick him up and put him under the bar, and he goes and does a squat, and he picks it back up and sets the bar, and then he can't move again. And the bands that they put on his legs were like literally cutting into his legs. It was just that tight. I mean, it was kind of you wouldn't think that let's just say a strongman competition in high school, you wouldn't think that it would be that way, but it was. And that was kind of like one of those first overnight trips, staying away from home, doing something competitive, which kind of helped get the juices flowing a little bit, for the wrestling game.
Did you have a big plan when you got out of school to like join a trade or go to college, or was wrestling the only thing you were thinking of?
I'll be honest with you. When I was in high school, and I was an average student at best. Of course, being a little bit of a jock, I guess. I took a class one time that was called Independent Living. It's a home ec class, is what it is. Easy grade, and you get to eat all the time. So I took that class, and it was like I knew how to cook and all that, so it wasn't a big deal. But I tell people this story, and people think I'm lying when I'm telling them this, but it's the truth. And a lot of people go, well, that's kind of stupid on your behalf. So, like, I think it was the last day we were having this independent living class, the teacher went around to everybody in the room, and we were all sitting there kind of in a group, and she's like, okay, what are you doing after you get out of school? And they'd be like, oh, I'm going to Wright State. Oh, I'm going to UC. Oh, I'm going to OSU. And I debated on it as it was getting closer to me. I'm like, am I going to sit there and lie, or am I going to tell the truth? Because quite honestly, I had no interest in going to college. And so straight out of high school, well, let me finish that. When it came to me, she's like, hey, what college are you going to go to? I go, I'm not. And she's like, well, what do you mean? I said, I'm going to become a professional wrestler. And everybody just kind of looked at me like, oh, man, what did he just say? Like there was all that doubt. And even when I was in high school, I was known to, every now and then if somebody would piss me off, I would, shove them in lockers and lock them in. And, I did stupid stuff like that. During lunch, after lunch was over, some of us guys would go up to the weight room, which was in the back of the gym upstairs, and we'd go up there and pretend that we were pro wrestlers. And a couple of the guys got they wanted to see how far they could push me, and it was like, one of them took a weightlifting belt and hit me with it, and another guy pulled my hair, and I was like, these guys think this shit's serious, so I'm going to be serious. Here I am grabbing dumbbells and throwing them at them. I'm hitting him with a weightlifting belt. You know, I would wrap a weightlifting belt around him and tighten it on him as tight as I could and pick him up and try to carry him and throw him against the wall. You know, I'm serious, man. That's how it was with me back then. But, you know, it was just, you know, that was all kids stuff. You know, every now and then I'll have somebody hit me up on Facebook, like a couple of the guys that I did that to, and they're like, man, we're really sorry. And I was like, what's there to be sorry about, man? I, you know, became a wrestler and did that for several years, and, you know, so ain't nothing to be sorry about, man. We were kids.
And
we
back
were
then,
fun,
the phrase
you know?
boys will be boys was okay to say. Now,
yep, absolutely.
I'm sure you remember the first live event that you ever went to. How old were you?
I tell you what, the first live event that I actually remember going to was probably in about 1973.
Okay.
I was born in 68. So 73, it was at Waynesville High School. There were two brothers on the show named Benny and Billy McGuire. So if you know anything about the Guinness Book of World Records, you know who they are. You know who they are? The world's heaviest planet.
Were those the big black guys?
No, they're white guys, but on the pictures they used to have in Guinness Book, they always showed them riding motorcycles with their butt cracks hanging out.
That's a weird pull because I remember that.
But anyhow, they wrestled for a while, and it was so funny because they were parked up against the high school, and they were driving a little Pinto, and this little green Pinto, and they'd put cinder blocks behind the seat, their seats in the front, because they had to lay them back so far to drive. And that was back when CB radios were really big. And my dad was talking to him on the CB, and they called themselves Big Mac and Little Mac. And I guess Little Mac weighed like 5 pounds less than his brother, you know. But I remember that. I remember. I don't remember the whole card. I remember Flying Fred Curry being there. I remember the original Sheik being there. You know, and that's about all I remember of that. I don't remember it all. I recently had I'd heard this story all of my life. My dad had told me that when we were little kids that he used to take us to the fairgrounds there in Dayton to watch wrestling, and you know, during the Sheik's run. And Dad said I was always sitting on the end, and Flying Fred Curry used to come out there. And he would see me, and he'd always rub me on the head. Well, Nick Flying Fred has a young son named Nick, and if you look up Nick Curry on Facebook, the kid's very talented. I mean, he's like 21 probably. The kid is so talented that he could just about do anything he wants in this business. Then. And I told Nick, yes, absolutely, and a darn good one. He's old school though. He does a lot of moves, you know, a lot of flying head scissors, armbar type stuff. You know, I'll have to send you some link on some of his stuff. But it was so funny. I was telling Nick because I've been friends with Nick for probably 5 or 6 years, and I told Nick one night, I said, Nick, I'm embarrassed to tell you this story, but if I tell you this, will you please tell your dad? And he was like, yeah. And Nick thought I was going to tell him something about like a secret on his dad, which I honestly don't know any. But I told Nick that story I just told about how you know, Flying Fred used to rub me on the head. So after I got done telling him that story, about 5 minutes later, he goes, yeah, I just told Dad about it, and Dad said he remembers. And I'm sitting there, and I'm laughing my ass off. I'm going, there ain't no way that he would remember that. You know, Flying Fred's probably 80 years old now, and it's like I doubt that he really remembers that. But I can appreciate the fact that, you know, that he still lets me believe what I was told to be true. So I'm assuming that it was true.
That's the difference between old school and the new age. I remember the first match I went to was either 72 or 73, and they used to hold them at the Dayton Gym Club before somebody bought it out and changed it over. But it was Sheik's Outlaw Wrestling. Because they would slide in with big time wrestling. The great thing that I'd like to mention about Dayton is the fact that we had everybody come through. We had NWA, we had WWWF. Then of course Mid-South came up a couple of times. But usually we'd have to go down to closest they'd get was like Louisville. But yeah, we saw the WWF, we saw NWA, which became WCW. Roe's been here. TNA even did a show here once.
Dayton is very rich in history as far as wrestling goes, though. Just like you're saying. Everybody at one time or another has been the Dayton.
Oh yeah, I remember the first show that I went to. I swear to God, it was Bruiser Brody. Scared the shit out of me because back in the 70s, you play your gimmick, and only thing I can remember was those big furry boots, and I almost pissed myself.
Right. Well, Brody. The thing with Brody though is, I've heard a lot of stuff about Brody, and I never met Brody, so I can't confirm or deny, but the thing with Brody is that he not only liked to scare the fans, but he would scare the guys that he was working with. I've seen Al Snow talk about that, where they were going to do TV out in St. Louis, I think, for NWA or whatever it was, and him and his partner were to work Brody and another guy. And I guess the other guy was scared to death of Brody, and Al more or less told Brody, which is actually a thing you should do if you get called to do TV, and the guy, the star, let's call him, looks at you and says, "Hey, who wants to take this?" You should probably be the first one to stand up and say, "I want it." Show that you want to be there and you've got the balls to take it. Well, I guess Al stood up and said that he would take it, and the other guy kind of cowered down. But I guess when it came down to it, when he gave that big boot or whatever, he gave it to the other guy. He didn't give it to Al. And it's like he splattered that guy's nose and shit. I don't think he kicked him, hard enough to let's just say he kicked him hard enough to break his nose. I don't think he was trying to kick it through his head. But guys, back then were like that, and it's the same old thing you've heard a million times about, Hulk Hogan and Hiro Matsuda. Back in them days, man, if you couldn't go in there and hang and prove yourself, then you weren't getting into business. Nowadays you got guys that will say, "Hey, you like wrestling? Come to one training session. The following week I'll have you in front of a live crowd." And that's what's wrong with a lot of wrestling today. I apologize if I'm skipping around. Just things kind of flow together.
No. I mean, because wrestling back then was a brotherhood. It's almost like the modern day gangs where you have to take a beat down to get into the gang.
Right. Well, it's like, and I think that you probably know this. But back in in wrestling today, a lot of these young guys, I seen it. I didn't see it happen. I seen it on video, and I'll say I'm ashamed to say it, but happened to be a guy I trained. He was wrestling a guy over in Richmond, Indiana, and the guy disrespected him. So he turns around and he breaks the guy's jaw. The guy had to have his jaw wired shut for 6-8 weeks, whatever it is. And I told the kid that I trained, I was like, "Why did you do that?" And he was like, "Well, he disrespected me." I said, "That guy's your brother in this business." He's like, "He's not my brother." I said, "That's why you've got the business wrong." You know, back in the old days, if somebody would have done something like that, what would have happened was, you know, because those guys would go out on tour, you know, they'd be out 4 or 5 days a week, kind of like a WWE deal now. And what would happen was, if somebody got hurt on that show, and that guy has a wife and kids at home, you realize that cost everybody on the show money, right? Because what the promoter would do is the promoter would say, okay, you're making $50 a night or whatever. Now, since you hurt somebody, you're making $40 a night, and all the rest of the guys are making $40 a night because we got to still pay this guy. We're still going to pay him because you hurt him. And that's what guys don't realize today, is that it was a true brotherhood back then.
And
you know, it wasn't.
And if you're in the ring with somebody, you can be the best wrestler in the world, but all it takes is for your opponent to sandbag you, and you look like shit. So the most important person has to be the person that you're wrestling, and you come secondary. They need to make you look good, so you can make them look good, and it's a great match, and everybody wants to come back and drop some more money the next time you're in town.
Right, and it's a chicken shit thing to do somebody that way, because how hard is it to hurt somebody when the guy is handing you his body? You know what I'm saying? I mean, that is just chicken shit to do that. I mean, anybody can, you know, kick somebody upside the head if the guy's just going to let you do it. The guy, I'm sure that the guy didn't expect it to happen, but you know, it did. And
you know, part of that has to go to, you know, selling the injury, overinflating things. Because I mean, back in the day, you know, these guys were running circuits that might have kept them busy for like 250 days out of the year. Some even more. So you had to be in the best health that you could be in. By the way, since we're down at the bottom of the hour, I did want to make sure that if you want to know a little bit more about Maniac Mark, down in the descriptor, there's his Facebook. There's also an official Maniac Championship Wrestling page. That's down there too. My links are down there. In case you like what I do, throw me some love. But at the top of the hour, we'll start doing questions. So please have some prepared, and we'll ask them as they come once we get to the 9 o'clock hour. Now, do you remember? Well, how did you go about getting into actual wrestling? Because, you know, a lot of times, especially back in the era when you were trying to get in, schools were a little bit more closed, a little bit more secretive. You didn't see them popping up on every street corner.
You know, it's kind of a. You know, it's kind of a. Believe it or not, that's kind of an interesting story. Back in when I graduated high school in August. It wasn't August. It was August of '87. Let me think. Yeah, August of '87 when I started wrestling. August 28th. But when I graduated high school in about late May, early June, whatever it was, of '87, I had attended a show, an independent show, in the next town over from me in Lebanon, Ohio. And the way I found out about the show was the promoter and the guys were out.
Okay, we're going back live.
He started bragging one year at Christmas time about getting a new fucking 52-inch TV and shit, and I said, "What about fucking money you owe me?" I'll get you. Like, yeah, okay.
We're back live. We're just telling stories while we're getting back up. So yeah, you said it was an interesting story about how you got into how you found a school.
Okay, so we were telling stories, and the thing is, we were believing them too. But anyway, so I was working in this grocery store and happened to be the promoter, and some of the guys came driving around, 10 o'clock at night probably. I'm outside, and hand me a flyer and seen that they was going to have wrestling at the local armory, and figured I would go check it out. it was an independent show, so I mean, it is what it is. There was a guy on there named Crusher Davison was one of the guys. They had a girl on there named Lexi Dawn, who was a girl from Dayton, who she used to work at Hara Arena. There was a guy named Dave Trainer, who wrestled as Atomic Rhino, who's really, really good friend of mine still to this day. And after the show, I got a hold of the promoter, and I called him one day, and then I found out that he was no longer their promoter. Something had fallen out. Well, while I was working in this grocery store, it was a chain, and they said, well, hell, one of the guys that lives up in Springfield, he's a wrestler. And so I made a trip up to see this guy, and the guy wrestled on the indies around here under the name Savannah Slim. And Savannah's like, yeah, man. He said, start coming to the school, man. It was on Main Street in Dayton at the time. And so I ended up getting in with them. That old cliche, you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
I think I paid $350 to go to that school. I wasn't there a year probably, and got hurt pretty bad by Crusher Davidson. He was a guy that was he was one of those guys that he would take advantage of you in the ring.
Yeah.
He actually hurt me for real. But in between that time that I more or less left that promotion, we were doing shows over here in Lebanon, Ohio. It was an old, it's a pallet place now, and believe it or not, it's like 5 minutes from where I currently live. And it was like just a little indoor arena-looking place, and there was guys on the show like Roger Ruffin out of Cincinnati. I think the first show I was ever on there, and I was just doing a battle royal. Yeah, I was green as goose shit, as we say. And Bobo Brazil was the headliner that night. Greatest guy, one of the greatest, nicest human beings I ever met in my life. He pulled into the building, and the promoter said, go help him, get his gear. He was in his 60s then. I go out there, and of course I think he might have had Reverend Tiny Hampton with him. Bobo was driving, and I walked out there, and I said, hey, how you doing? Can I get your gear for you? And he's like, yeah, son, it's right there in the back seat. I never cared to carry somebody's gear. That's part of paying your dues in this business.
Yeah.
And so I open up the back door, and all of a sudden the door shuts real quick. And I stood there in amazement, and I turned around, and I'm looking at Bobo, who's like 6'6", probably 6'7", and I was like, oh man, what did I do now? I done pissed off Bobo Brazil. And he looks at me and he goes, what's your name, young man? And I said, my name's Mark, sir. He says, I'm Bobo Brazil, and I'm glad to meet you. And he held his hand out, and we shook hands, and I said, I know who you are, sir. He goes, now you can get my gear and carry it in. And it was just kind of a neat little moment, for me, because I had always heard about Bobo Brazil my whole life. Here I am, an 18-year-old kid, doing a show with Bobo Brazil. There was a lot of funny stories that happened that night. We were sitting there in the locker room. Of course, I was sitting there in the locker room with Bobo, and Bobo's sitting there, and he's chewing Levi Garrett, smoking a Cuban cigar. I think I was dipping back then, and said, you want a dip? And he declined that. He said it burns his mouth too bad. And not to, we can say anything we want on here, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I'm not going to get too graphic anyway, but Bobo proceeded, to strip down because Bobo had really bad knees. And so he was rubbing his legs down with Ben Gay. Well, he had a towel across his lap, and that towel wasn't quite long enough for what Bobo had and what Bobo was hiding.
So,
and of course he's sitting right across from the door, and one of the guys' girlfriends, without knocking or anything, she just thought she could walk right in. She opened the door, and Bobo closed his legs and looked up, and she goes, "Oh, my God." She's like, "I've never seen nothing like that." Turned around and left. And Bobo looks at me, he goes, "I get that all the time, son." And I said, "Bobo, how many kids do you have?" And he says, 8 that I know of. He said, "I think I got more like 18. And I was like, I've told these independent guys when they want to hear some of these old stories, I tell them that sometimes. And the first thing that comes out of their mouth, they're like, "Are you gay?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not, but it wouldn't matter if I was, because when you see something like that, you have to salute that. There's no other way around. There's no other way around that. I'm sorry, but there is no, they talk about John Holmes and them guys. I think somebody should have measured Bobo, because I think Bobo had him beat. And, but just generally a nice guy. Couldn't ask for a nicer guy. And then I think the next month we came back there, and it was a big crowd, man. You couldn't even park there that night. The guy had just got finished playing for the Cincinnati Bengals during their strike season, and he had actually came to the gym a couple times in Dayton. They had moved it over to the Front Street buildings by then. The gym was over there.
Gotcha.
And it was none other than Brian Pillman.
Yeah.
And, so he had a little manager with him, and, he's driving a fucking $50,000 car that night, and just so happens.
Start this back. And we should be back.
All right. Rock and roll, hoochie coo.
Okay. So, if I remember correctly, we stopped with the slicing of tires.
Yeah, so there was a bunch of tires got sliced. But Brian Pillman was there. Really nice guy. Trained with him a few times. Here, probably a year and a half ago, had the opportunity to meet his son Brian Jr. At an independent show over in Middletown, Ohio. He was, he's a good kid. Of course, he's working for MLW right now. I guess he did that Battle Royal for AEW on their first show.
Yeah.
He's been to England a couple times. Generally nice kid. He's learned the business right. He went to Lance Storm, trained him. And we every now and then we'll talk back and forth a little bit. And I remember when he was going to Canada to train, I told him something, and he was like, seemed really appreciative. And I told him, I said, "You got to remember one thing. Your name's Pillman. When everybody else is blowing up from doing drills, you do one more." And he says, "Well, why is that?" I said, "You're a Pillman." He said, "What's that got to do with anything?" I said, "You're going to get pushed more by all these promotions. You're going to start getting bookings immediately." And me and him have talked a little bit since then, and I think he appreciated me telling him that, because he just never really thought about that.
Well, and that's what his dad did. Right.
And the thing is, I will be the first one to say this, and I would probably catch a lot of flack for this. Is he getting some bookings because his name's Pillman? Absolutely. The thing is, he can put on a show. The kid is talented. It's not only that he has the name Pillman, but if he had the name Joe Blow, I think that once somebody would find him, he would be getting booked all the time.
I mean, he went out a little too early with AEW with the Battle Royal, but he didn't do a bad job.
Right. Right.
And I think, I remember the first match that I ever saw Pillman live. He wrestled Jushin Thunder Liger. at like a WCW event in like 92, I think, maybe 93.
Is that when they did the Mall of America or whatever?
No, it was in Dayton at I think it was the Bash at the Beach.
Yeah, I know that they worked each other quite a few times. I know they had a thing going there for a while with them too.
Yeah. When he went over to Japan as Gaijin, Liger fell in love with him immediately and loved working matches because he had that work ethic.
Right. And like I say, Junior's got the same ethic.
No,
he really does.
That's going to get him far.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I think he's a little taller than his dad, but not by much. And I don't think it's going to hold him back because, he does all that aerial stuff, and he is very talented for what he does.
Yeah, I met him back in 2000 during the Pillman Memorial.
Right.
And I went up just saying hi to Melanie, and and he was like, "Yeah, I'm going to be a wrestler too." I'm like, "All right, cool."
Yeah.
If you got the same, even if you have half the passion that your old man did, yeah, you're definitely going to get far. I think that was the same time I met the flat top, blonde haired prototype John Cena.
Right. Yeah.
I was like, because it was a botch fest. For what they did, because he was wrestling for OVW at the time.
Right.
And I came up and shook his hand, and I'm like, man, you got the build, you got the look. I hope you can get those moves down, because, you'll be a superstar in no time. And he just kind of smiled, nodded his head, and said thanks.
Yeah, I was never, I've never been a big John Cena fan. I guess a lot of it has to do with the fact that, he doesn't really wrestle in wrestling gear. I respect him, though, in the fact that I know a lot about his background, and, guys like him and Sting and Mick and all them guys at one time or another, they all slept in their cars, and so I got to respect him for that. But, like, young guys today, they don't understand that. They think that they ought to be able to, whoever books them ought to pay them $100 and get them a motel room and, all that shit, and that's just not the business. The business is it's not a glorious business. I mean, you even have guys in the WWE that are not making a ton of money, and I mean, I don't know if you've ever read anything about, he's been out of the WWE for several years, Trevor Murdoch.
Yeah.
Who was tag team partners with Lance Cade until Lance died.
Yeah.
Trevor Murdoch, I read a story on him. He was on my Facebook page for a while, and when they released him, he was he became like a truck driver, and then he started working road construction and just doing whatever he could. But he was telling a story on there at one time that in his last year or two there, his contract only paid him $35,000 a year. Wow. And they were trying to get him to work 200 shows a year. Now, you sit there and you think about this. You're in WWE, you're traveling, and a lot of those guys' travel's not covered. It depends on what's in your contract. So he's having to get a rental car. He's probably rooming with somebody, if he's smart. If not, he's out, what's a cheap room, $40 a night? So I mean, figure that up. Figure $40 a night for 200 nights a year. And take that away from your $35,000, and now take your food away from that. Now take your car rental away from that. You can go broke in that business. Not everybody makes the Cena, Undertaker, Triple H kind of money.
Wow. Well,
it's like.
It's the same thing as getting into professional sports or getting into acting. Right. Only about 5% of the people ever make it, and out of those 5%, you can basically break it down to maybe about 10 or 15% actually make really good money. The rest, it's get by wages.
Right. I mean that's like people were like when.
Yep, we're back live now. Okay.
Oh, cool.
So I am interested. Your first match, you said it was a battle royal.
Yeah, the very first one, battle royal. Yeah.
When you did your actual, because I always consider battle royal curtain jerking, usually to help fill up time on the card. When did you actually get your first match? Was it a single? Was it a tag?
I did a single like the following month. It was nothing to write home about. It was like, it was one of them quick in, quick out. And, of course, I did the job, and I was glad to do the job. I did not mind that a bit. It wasn't until years later in the early 90s when I went to Al Snow's school to where I really felt I got my money's worth. I paid Al a lot of money. He was charging a lot at the time. I mean, you're talking like $2,500. I paid it all up front. I was lucky I had a good job, and I was working road construction, and in the winter I got laid off and called him one day. And, of course, when he answered, I asked for Al Snow, and, of course, he says, Al's not here. And I said, is Alan Sarvin there? And he's like, yeah, this is Alan Sarvin. So when I got there, he's like, yeah, just ask for Al Sarvin when you get here. So I go up in the elevator and go upstairs, and I was like, you're Al Snow? And he goes, yeah, I'm Al Sarvin, too. Yeah, I was like, I didn't know at the time. And I greatly appreciate everything Al ever taught me. Whether, there was a rumor going around at one time that Al didn't like me. And it was actually started by his brother.
Logan? Logan can be an asshole.
And the funny thing was, the funny thing was Logan was not allowed at the gym while Al was there. Al didn't want him around. And me and Logan used to train together after Al would leave because at Al's place he had dorm rooms in there so you could live at the gym. So in other words, your $2,500 was paying for your living expense there too. And so since I worked a seasonal job, I lived there for several months, and Al created this Maniac gimmick, and we did TV for DATV there in Dayton. Dale Groh would come up and video it, him and his wife. And the first night we debuted the Maniac gimmick, it was like, I ended up with, for the TV taping, I ended up with 3 wins in one night. I'd had matches under my real name a few times, but then once we developed the gimmick, then I got a little bit of a push, and we're on shows with all the guys from Michigan, like the Sabus of the world. Sabu was always on the shows there in Lima. Every now and then we'd get Benoit to come in. When Al went to Smoky Mountain, he would bring in Glenn Jacobs to work with. Since some of us were living at the gym, this was back when UFC started big, Dan Severin would come down and spar with us, and that was not fun.
I would pass.
But, Dan's a really nice guy, and I'm sure he don't even remember that. I mean, that's early 90s. But, he, lost that first UFC, then won the second one. But, we were all so proud, especially on that second one, to see Al Snow walking Severin to the ring, and he had his Body Slammers Pro Wrestling Gym Lima, Ohio T-shirt on, and here we are, his students, and we're just like, man, how cool is that, And it was funny back then when you were trained by Al, when you would go to other bookings and stuff like that, it was kind of like the guy, if your opponent knew that you were trained by Al Snow, they wanted to discuss the match, but they didn't want to do none of the talking. They would be like, okay, what's your plan for this match? because they knew that Al was probably, and still is, the best trainer out there. Al was just in Dayton over the weekend for the Bike Fest deal they had there at the fairgrounds, and really wanted to go, wasn't able to, and a friend of mine went and told Al, that he knew me, and Al sent his best and hoped I was doing well, and all that good stuff. But I mean, I could never in my life ever thank Al enough for giving me. I don't like to use the word. I don't know if I want to use the word talent because I don't know if I'm that talented, but for giving me what he gave me and afforded me the ability to make my dream come true and let me pursue something that I always wanted to do for so many years. And it's funny. I hear guys nowadays, some of the younger guys will tell me that actually want to know about the business. They'll be, they'll want to know something. They'll start talking to me, and every one of them tells me the same thing. They go, we watch a lot of shoot interviews, and they go, talking to you is just like listening to Al talk. And I said, I listened well when I went to Al, And I said, I don't intentionally do that, but I can only teach what I was taught, And when I pass that on, it's going to sound like Al because that's where I learned it from, But I could never in my wildest dreams ever thank Al enough. Blue Meanie was there at the same time I was there. He came along a little later than I did. I told Brian here about a year ago, I said, do you remember what we used to do after training? And he was like, yeah, I know me and you'd go out to eat sometimes. And I had to remind him, and he was like, did I really do that? And I was like, yeah, you did. There was a Ryan's Steakhouse in town, and we would go there. We'd get out of training at 9 o'clock. We figured we had like an hour left, and we would go there and eat. And of course, on the way out the door, if you remember, Ryan's Steakhouse would they would either have like peppermints or butterscotch mints or whatever right as you're going out the door. Well, Brian, he would always take his T-shirt and pull it up and dump whatever's in there. He'd dump the whole basket into his shirt as he walked out the door. He was like, I didn't do that. I go, yeah, you did, brother. Or either that or we would go to Wendy's and get there at 5 minutes before they're supposed to close, and they would say, you got to take that to go. And Brian, he's a New Jersey kid, so he would, South Philly in New Jersey. So he would be like, fuck y'all, we're sitting down and eating, but generally good guy, But it's like the greatest gratitude I guess I get now is that Al used to call us his kids, and I call my guys that I train my kids. And it's good to know that some of them are still out there, out there wrestling. One of my lady wrestlers that I trained, she was out, and you know how the independent scene works. But she was out recently making a little under $200 a night. She had to go to West Virginia, but she lives up by Columbus. So still that was a good payday. I got to her very first match against another girl I trained. It made me feel good because her parents were there, and she'd been training in Dayton and for like 2 years, and they took her money and wouldn't let her wrestle. And I finished training her because she was going to quit, and I begged her not to because I quit at one time, and I hated to see anybody do that because I knew what I felt. And so the very first match they ever did, of course, I had a referee in there that knew every spot in the match, but it was so gratifying to see her parents were there, and her parents literally cried watching her wrestle. And it brought a tear to my eye. And I was working concessions that night, and they hit every spot like they should have. They'd done their deal. A few months later, they both appeared on WWE's main event. Cody got them booked to be Rosebuds in Pittsburgh and Detroit, and then they did a photo shoot, which paid them another $100. So they did like a $300 deal. And a couple of the guys I've trained, one guy owns a donut shop in Trenton, and I didn't actually train him. Al trained him, but I hooked him up. I couldn't pay for a donut at his donut shop today if I had to. he feels like he owes me, and I'm not that kind of person. I don't feel anybody owes me. Another guy I trained from down here in South Lebanon, Ohio. He always wanted to be a wrestler. I trained him, and a guy named Tony Evergreen were traveling to Michigan about every weekend, wrestling all over the place. And still to this day, man, he's always like, let me take you to lunch. Let me take you to dinner. And it's like, why, dude? And he's like, oh, I owe you. And it's like, he doesn't owe me anything. But what I do get out of that is respect. And to get respect in this business, is, as you know, it's pretty tough to do. So I'm perfectly happy with that.
I do have a quick Al story. And it's funny, too, because every time Al was in town wrestling, and I can't tell you why it happened, but 3 or 4 times, I would always be sitting next to his mom and dad. And his mom. She's a card. She is hilarious. Yeah. Well, it's a was now, I think. Is she?
No, she's still around. I think his dad died, but she's still around.
It was.
She's still
and it was funny because they would wear like airbrush shirts, airbrushed Al Snow shirts, and I would always get into talking with them, and I'd always go to the concession stand and like get them drinks, just because.
Right.
And then anytime, and then they introduced me to Al once, as the young gentleman who got them drinks, and. And the first thing I ever said to him was like, man, you look like Logan Kane. You want to see his face sour up? And I ran that gimmick every time that I ran into him ever since.
Right.
And
right.
What?
He's a good guy, though.
It's funny because he eventually called me. He eventually said, you can stop being an asshole."
Right. Yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah. Okay. So.
But I could tell you an Al Snow story about. It would be comparable to the Bobo Brazil story, but I think I'll leave that one
okay.
Yeah, He's close to Bobo, just not quite as much. And the only reason I know that's because he was doing that Shinobi gimmick, and he had wrestled Dan Severn at a high school in Michigan. We were wrestling, and so Shinobi, I was going to wrestle Al right at the next match. Well, they took a short intermission, and Shinobi had blown that green mist, and so he had to jump in the shower right quick to get all that shit off, to protect kayfabe, that people wouldn't know it was him, even though everybody did know it was him. And so he comes out of the shower, and of course I was in better shape back then. Now I have to have somebody lace my boots for me, usually the Green Boys. So I'm leaning over lacing my boots, and I start hearing people like chuckling, right? And I was like, what the hell's going on here? And I look to my left, I look to my right, and then I look up, and there's Al. Al in all his glory. And I said, Al, you need to put that thing away before you put somebody's eye out with that. And we're sitting there talking over the match, and I was just like, oh my God. Like he made me feel like a little boy, let's say that.
Okay.
Well, I mean, in comparison. He had it going on. Yeah, of course. It ain't no worse than just so we're on the level here. Not that there's, I'm not that way, but to be in the wrestling business, you got to be a little bit on the gay side. But of course, it ain't no worse than Marty Adams taking me and Roger Cox to ECW in Cleveland, and walking around back in the locker room, and Francine back there butt naked and shooting up with Jack Daniels. They were literally at that time using Jack Daniels to shoot up with. She was like butt naked. She was like butt naked back there, like it wasn't no big deal.
I always wish her the best. I got to go to Swanson and Rittner Street once. That building literally smelled like sweat, alcohol, and vomit. It didn't make a difference where you were.
Right. Right.
But so you got your training done. How do you set forth in your career? Where do you go next?
It was kind of funny because, as I'd mentioned a little bit before, me and Bobby Fulton knowing each other, from the time I was 17, 18 years old, I knew Bobby Fulton. And I wasn't even finished with training, let's say, where, I get this call that came out of China Grove, North Carolina, and I'm like, who the hell's calling me from China Grove? And I pick up the phone and I hear, Mark, it's Bobby Fulton. Hey, I need you to come and work for me. And I'm like, dude, I ain't even out of training yet. Doesn't matter. I need you. I was like, okay. So I proceed to go to wrestle for him down in Manchester, Ohio, and trying to think which way it was. I know that when you wrestle for Bobby, you either had 8 or 10 guys on the show, and that was it. Not this 30 guys that they have now. And of course, you'd have your opening match, and then I would be in the second match. Me against, I think that time it was me against Bobby. We went about 30 minutes. Ended up in a double disqualification. So now it's his tag team partner, which was in the first match, against my tag team partner, which was in the first match. Which back then was, I was under a hood as the Iron Russian, and my tag team partner was a guy who wrestled in WCW and Smoky Mountain Wrestling, Bobby Blaze. And so then that set up for us to come back after intermission for 2 out of 3 fall, 45 or an hour time limit that went 45 minutes. So Bobby would make you work really hard on his shows, which was good. It was a good learning experience, especially being green like that. And of course, I really never figured out why Bobby did it, but at the end of the night when he'd give you your payout, which would be like $35 for working twice in the night, and he'd want your Social Security number because he was legitimately claiming it as a business. Is the only thing I could ever figure out. And so he would do that. And then, of course, that makes you responsible for claiming your own shit. But then I know one night, that night in particular, the first night I was there, Jake the Snake Roberts headlined the show. And Jake was super nice, said I did good, whatever. The second time we went, the main event was Abdullah the Butcher against Cactus Jack. And me and Bobby Blaze, every time I talk to Bobby Blaze on Facebook, he keeps saying he's going to put it in his book, and I doubt that he ever has. But me and him had the distinct honor of helping Abby put his fat belt on. Yeah, he has one of them fat belts, or I always call it a fat belt. I don't know what else to call it. A sauna belt. And we had to take it, literally had to grab it and stretch it, and Abby would back into it. And we would pull it around, and he'd get it to where we could zip it on him. And he keeps saying he's going to put it in his book, and I don't know if he ever has. But that's how he always remembers me, when I tell him that little story. And then it kind of just took off from there, really. I was working for Bobby a lot. Just so happens that the grocery store that I used to work in, they had transferred their meat department manager and made him a big shot with the company. And the guy they brought in was from Springfield, and his name was Wimpy Watson, who was one of the owners of the IWA out of Columbus. He was, he later became Bull Miller's stepdad, and so I took him, he says, can you bring me a videotape? And I'm like, absolutely. And so I took him a video of what I had done so far, and I don't like to toot my own horn, but, they said that they were really impressed and they really liked my work, and was I available for every month in Springfield. They gave me a rundown for the next year of every date I was booked. Went there. The first show I did, probably in front of 800 people. I teamed up with Thunder Morgan to go against Savannah Slim and Hollywood Hubie. And then right after that, they had a little group called the Riot Squad. And so I became a member of the Riot Squad. And, once a Riot Squad member, always a Riot Squad member. And to this day, I guess I'm still a Riot Squad member. There's not many of us left. But, so I had bookings with them. And back then, Bull was literally running about 4 days a week. Or no, let me take that back. Maybe sometimes it would be 4 days a week for a couple weeks, and then sometimes it would only be maybe 4 days a month. But still, he would do Thursday. He would do Thursday in Chillicothe. He would do Friday in Columbus. He would do Saturday in Marion. He would do Sunday back at his gym in Columbus. So I mean, there was a good little run, and I'm doing all this on top of working road construction for a living. And I mean, it was tough at times. But that's the passion for the business. I mean, I had a '92 Mustang convertible, and when I sold that thing, probably in '97, give or take, '98, I had almost 300,000 miles on that thing when I sold it. From the travel. So, but that's and then every now and then I'd still work for Bobby if he needed me. I would work for Roger Rosenberry, who ran I think it was All Star Wrestling Alliance up around it was north of Marion. It was up in that area, Mansfield, up in that area, kind of like Jimmy Lee's area now. Wherever I was needed, I would go. I worked down in Kentucky, Tennessee, Indiana. Wherever I was needed, I would go. And to me, it was never really about the money. It's about the let's put it this way. Once I found out where to get quality priced 8x10s of myself, which I know people will say, I'll just print them off at home. Well, depending on what kind of printer you got and how much ink you use, that may not be a bright idea. When I was getting, and I know they still offer it today, it might be a little higher, but I was getting 8x10, black and white, cardstock. It was probably a matte finish. I was getting 500 of them for like $85. Which I didn't think was too bad. I don't know on a laser printer how many pictures you could get like that. I don't know the price comparison, but I know that once I got those, and I was wrestling in Michigan a lot then, I literally ran out of them in like within a month. And then I turned around and I bought, did a different pose, and I bought 1,000 for like $105. Like I say, once again, I don't know how that compares to like Staples or print them themselves, but so out of that 1,000, I probably still got about 500 of those left. I got them laying around here somewhere, but it's like, I guess what I'm getting at is, if you're going to be in the business, don't rely on the promoter to do all the work. Get off your ass, invest in yourself, get some money, It's not going to hurt you to go out and work somewhere a couple days a week to get you. If you want to be a pro wrestler, you got to have another job. And if you're not going to have another job and you're going to live at home, then still, by all means, go buy you a $25 push mower and go mow grass a couple of days a week and make you a couple $100. Buy you a $300 pair of wrestling boots. Buy you some wrestling gear. Get what you need to look like a wrestler. It's like Bobby Fulton said to me one time. He says, when you go to the Reds game, don't all the players wear uniforms? I said, absolutely they do. Their spikes and their uniforms. Football players, they all wear a uniform. It should be the same with wrestling. In a lot of aspects, I'm saying, I'm a firm believer that guys need to have boots. But there again, I know there's guys that wrestle without boots. And then there's guys that wrestle in tennis shoes, and I absolutely hate that.
Wrestling gear cannot be bought at Hot Topic.
Right.
You see a lot of that. And that's in the business what we used to call trash baggers. Because they'd show up in that shit.
Right.
It's like, at least you could go out and buy like a $50 pair of Tigers. And use those as wrestling shoes, because they are wrestling shoes.
Right. Right. I'm not even a fan of those, but that's just my opinion. It's just like when them guys buy them pleather pants. I hate that shit. You got 20 guys on the show with pleather pants. Hate it. My gimmick, and I'd been told this a few times. I actually had guys stand up for me over this. They're like, yeah, but you wore hospital scrubs. Well, that was the gimmick. And then one of my old foes from up in Columbus, he backed me up one night and he said, you guys can say all the shit you want to say about him wearing scrubs. He said, but I changed with that man in the dressing room many a times. And he said, that son of a bitch had gear on underneath that was made by K&H Originals, which was the original wrestling gear makers out of Johnstown, Ohio. And I did. I always had that stuff on underneath. I mean, not that I figured I bought it, I might as well use it, even though nobody's going to see it. But it made me feel a little bit better about it. But if you got a guy with a gimmick, then I guess that's one thing. But, 20 guys wearing pleather pants, I don't even know what the gimmick is there. I think it's just guys that are just lazy and don't want to spend any money. It's like I've told guys before. I used to tell my kids this, and you may agree and you may not agree. The perfect place to buy shit, if you really want something outrageous or buy you a boa or something like that, something just to add to your gimmick a little bit, wait until a couple of days after the Halloween store closes or is about to close. You can go there and you can get makeup 50% off. You can go there and get a boa for $1. You can go there and get some kind of fucking cheap mask that it might be just a ring entrance mask, that you want to jimmy up with some kind of crap on it. I mean, I'm not saying that's like the greatest place to go, but if it's they're doing that half price deal or whatever, then to me, by all means, go there.
Well, Bo, right? Bodacious. He was going upstate, and he was wrestling masked, and the gimmick was he was Satan. And he's like, I don't know what I can do with this. And I sent him a picture. I was like, here's a crushed red velvet cape that I picked up at a 90% off a Halloween sale, and here's a pitchfork. You want to use them? And he was like, I'm down.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I mean, you can put a little creativity into what you're doing, and I just want to say, since we're way past the top of the hour, so anybody who has questions for Maniac Mark, please feel free. Go ahead, throw them in the chat. We'll ask them as they come. But let me ask you this, because I mean, you're still a wrestling fan, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
What do you think is wrong? And I'll start with the TV stuff, with the big timers. What do you think's wrong with the wrestling product that's being presented now?
I have a real hard time watching like Raw and stuff right now. I just can't get into it. I don't. How do I want to say this? Like with Seth Rollins being a champion. Not that Seth Rollins has not earned that, but when you compare Seth Rollins, more to me, is more of an intercontinental kind of champion. I don't really feel like he has the size to be the heavyweight champion. Same thing with Kofi. They tried to make that all about race at one time, and I absolutely hated that. I also think that, in my opinion, Vince needs to step aside. He kind of needs to let Triple H take over.
I honestly think Triple H is doing a good job with NXT.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but you do know that in Triple H's office, he has that TV that is a monitor that he runs a feed through to all the NXT training and all that. So he can sit in his office and watch it of what's going on, which is good. It's a big money saver, and he can sit there and watch and see what's going on. I think Triple H has a lot better mind for the business right now. Vince is getting to that age to where Vince is not going to adapt to too many things right now. I know Moxley recently said something to that effect. And I gotta agree with it. I find it WWE right now somewhat boring. I like Becky Lynch and her deal. Like I say, I'm not a Seth Rollins fan.
Well, and Mox was a shit stir anyway when he was HWA.
Right. I mean, he's always going to be that way because that's just him. And it's like, I did see later on that super card or whatever they had down there, the Undertaker and Goldberg, and I guess they got into it in the back. In my opinion, Goldberg has never been a good wrestler.
I agree.
Goldberg, they brought him in, and of course, I'm talking about WCW, and from one week to another, he was winning 20 matches. That old, them old mysterious matches that happen that nobody sees. He went 175-0 in a matter of no time. He's never been one to go over about 5 minutes. I've seen him on some of the WWE pay-per-views do that. Have him 7-minute matches. And they said that the Undertaker, got on him after that last show, or that last thing they had down there. And, Undertaker even did wrong in that one WrestleMania, him and Roman Reigns or whatever. I think I might have said Roman Reigns earlier when I was meeting Seth Rollins. Did I do that? Whichever. It doesn't matter anyway. You know what I'm getting at. But, where they had a horrible match, but it's like I think Undertaker has stood back and looked at that, and I think he's tried to get himself back in a little bit better shape and a little bit more strength, because he would take a year off, and now he's wrestling a little more.
Well, so it's also because he got $1 million paycheck going to Saudi Arabia.
Right. Well, that Saudi Arabia deal is like the greatest deal in the world for all of them that go. I mean, I've heard that that's like a $30-40 million deal.
Oh yeah,
just to go down there.
They will literally pick the people that they want and pay them whatever needs to be paid for them to show up. Because Taker wants to retire. He wants to retire in a bad way. Because he's had what? Right. At least 3 hip surgeries and surgery on both knees.
Right.
He's not getting around much anymore. You get up to that age because the impact of wrestling now, because they've throttled it up so much, is not like, a guy like Ric Flair who can last, 30-40 years because they're not taking high impact bumps.
Right. Right. Well, that's like even with I was all about the WWE doing the whole women's division deal and all that, and I've noticed in the last several months that it seems like they're almost getting away from it now.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like there's, and maybe it's just me, but it just seems like they're using the girls now for fill-ins when they need to kill 5 or 6 minutes.
Well,
I mean, you got Sarah Logan and them. It was like they were supposed to be something, and then all of a sudden they don't do much with them.
It's Vince reasserting his control because he does not think that women can headline. It was Triple H trying to push a female headliner for WrestleMania.
Right.
But
because it's just like right there now. And I'll always say this: I think Nattie Neidhart is probably one of the best wrestlers out there. There's nothing she can't do. But her job, probably until the day she decides to retire, is they may give her another run eventually. But her job is basically to get every other girl over.
I see these people who are underappreciated in WWE taking a look at AEW and going, well, shit, there's opportunity there now.
Right. That AEW is a scary thing.
Well,
just as far as that guy that owns that football team or whatever that owns them, more or less. I know he's got Vince kind of money. But I mean, it's just like when Ted Turner owned all WCW or NWA and all that shit. You can only lose money so long. And people talk like this last pay-per-view. I didn't see it, but people were talking about how, that it wasn't even 50% capacity there. I don't know. I don't know for sure.
I watched it, and it looked pretty full.
Said that the couple of rumors I've seen, they said that they blacked it out in some of the places.
But that's a normal gimmick to drop the lights.
Right.
But yeah, I mean that place was full. It was ruckus. There was nothing piped in.
Right. Yeah. It's just like they're talking about. I've never understood what they were talking about the chair being gimmicked. I never actually seen a statement like that. The Young Bucks said something, but everybody's like, oh, they're saying that they gimmicked the chair, and they said something like they didn't, and I don't know. I've personally never heard.
You mean the one that?
It's just like
you mean the one that they hit Cody Rhodes with?
The one that Cody took.
Yeah. That chair did not look gimmicked. It just looked like it was a soft pat. I mean, it's one of those. You're sliding the chair down the guy's head instead of wrapping it around it. Like how Balls Mahoney used to wrap fucking chairs around people's heads.
Well, when I watched that highlight of that, the guy to me didn't look like he didn't swing it real hard to begin with, which is fine. You're not trying to kill somebody. But I don't know. It just, you just don't know with these guys. It's like, I don't know. It's like I haven't really sat down and watched AEW enough to make much of an opinion on it. But it's like, I mean, they're going to do what they're going to do because they know that they can never go back to Vince. Well, I mean, Vince would probably eventually take them back, but he would make them pay. And and that's one thing. Another thing I'll say for Mox, though. When Mox knew that he was going to leave, look at how many times Mox jobbed in the last 2 or 3 months he was there. He has virtually 0 wins in the last 3 or 4 months.
He was getting paid to do a job, and he did that job.
Yeah, he said somewhere I read that his last appearance there, they only paid him $500. Yeah, said they shorted him on his money. And then everybody's like, oh, Renee Young's leaving next. And it's like, why would she leave? I mean, I know they're married, but that don't affect her. And he's spending his time between AEW and Japan anyway, so.
Yeah, but.
Yeah. She might
yeah, but sometimes wrestling can be vindictive. Even though she doesn't do anything, she might get blowback just because of Mox.
Right. Yeah. True. I don't know. Like I say, it's just a crazy business. You know, it's like, I don't know. You know, it's like, I was just thinking about this. I just want to share this real quick. It's kind of a funny little story. It's a neat little story, let's say. I remember being in, it was up around Marion. I was wrestling for Roger Rosenberry. He used the name KC Stryker back then in the late 90s. And it was me and Bull against the Batten twins. You remember the Batten twins?
Vaguely.
They did the Crockett Cup back in the 80s. Late 80s. Really talented guys. They did that. They did world class. They were all over the place. They were trained by the Pothos. And they had never wrestled against me before. So, you know, I'm a big guy, so they were like, they're little guys, and they were kind of scared. And before we walked out there, when you're in there with guys that are true professionals, there's really not a whole lot to talk about. Yeah, and I'm not one of those people. I cannot plan a match out like that because I'll forget. Or if the biggest mistake guys make when they plan their whole match is, what if something's not working? Then you got to change it up. You know? So I always went with the beginning, middle, and end. Well, just so happened that night, Bull was sick. And right before we went through the curtain, I looked at the Battens and I'm like, how long are we going tonight? They said it's a 1 hour time limit. It's best out of 3 falls. I was like, okay, how long are we going? They do 45 minutes. I laughed at them. I was like, yeah, okay. So we go out there, and those dudes were so quick. They went to give me a backdrop at one time, and I botched that. And they didn't try to rough me up or nothing. You know, they were fine with it. Yeah, they mentioned it to me afterwards, which I appreciated. And you know, and by the time it was said and done, every time Bull would get tagged in, he'd be in there for about 30 seconds, and he'd puke, so he'd tag back out. So I literally worked this whole match against them. And it was just tag in, tag out from them guys. And I think at the end they ended up winning. And they were like, the winners in 47 minutes, the Batten twins. I'm saying everything to myself. Them son of bitches wasn't lying. They were only off by 2 minutes. And they killed me. And ever since then, well, you know, one of them passed away a few years ago. But ever since then, they would say, man, every time you come to town, if Bull was doing a show at his gym, they wanted me every time. They said I was light in there with them, and they liked that. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I've worked them, worked Ken Patera, Tommy Rich, you know, just tons of different guys. And, you know, I thoroughly enjoyed it, you know, I learned my craft, and, I'm not an expert at it by any means. I'm sure that there's people that know more about it than I do. But, you know,
let's talk about that, because you've transitioned to promoter. Where do you find the biggest problems are right now with the independent wrestling circuit?
You know, being a promoter is like a big pain in the ass. It's like that big pimple on your ass that you just can't quite reach. And a lot of it has to do with the guys themselves, because guys think that they're worth more than what they really are. Guys now, they don't even want to sell a ticket to their girlfriend. You know, they want to be like, oh, well, that's my pay, you know, getting my girlfriend and our 12 kids in for free. You know, and Al Snow told me a long time ago, he said, treat it as like a business. He said, do you take your girlfriend to work with you? And I said, absolutely not. He says, don't bring her here then, unless she's paying to get in. And then the other thing I see on that is guys will bring their girlfriends, so they're in the building an hour or two before everybody else, the crowd's allowed in. And where's the girlfriends end up sitting? Front row. That should never happen. Girlfriends should sit in the back, and if there's room after the show starts, to move up. Yeah, to me, that's one of my big no-nos. Yeah, I just hate that. Even if they want to pay me for the seat, I honestly still don't want them sitting up front. I just think it's a bad deal.
Yeah, we used to but for SWI, we used to because we did over at the field house, and what we'd do is we'd put like the yellow gaffing tape across the aisle, and we'd say you can sit anywhere behind the yellow gaffing tape. Right. If you're getting in for free, you can sit there. Because you know the seats up front are for the paying customers.
Right. And here's another thing. I got two things for you to get your opinion on it. For one, whoever come up with this +1 bullshit? Because when I was wrestling for Al, we never had that. I had never heard of that until I was at a show.
Well, honestly, when I started working behind the scenes, they had it at Outlaw, they had it at IPWA, they had it at SWI. I don't know where it came from. I'll be honest with you, because when I was on the back side of the business, I just thought that was a common thing.
But see, here's the thing you got to think about, though. Also, think about this is, if you've got 20 supposed workers on the show, and they all bring a girl with them, how much money did the promoter just lose? Yeah. And then here's another one for you. What the fuck is a pre-show match? Because to me, guys are basing pre-show from what I've seen. If your show starts at 7:30 and you have guys come out at 6 or 7:15, that's your pre-show match. But it's still part of the show. So why is it a pre-show? Yeah, just because it started a little. I've argued this with 100 people, and I'm always going to stick to my guns because you're not going to get me to say anything different.
It's funny because when I was booking, I'm like, okay, this is when the match starts, and or this is when the show starts, and I've had to throw in guys because you know they'll come with their backup gimmicks, which are usually masks, and it's like, oh, we're not starting on time. All right, can you and you go out? Just do a 10-minute. You know, work it however you guys want to work it, whoever you want to put over. Doesn't matter. It's not for the big storyline.
Right.
And, you know, because you do not want people sitting in the seats twiddling their fucking thumbs for more than 10 minutes or so.
And that's another thing you don't want them fucking sitting there for 3 hours either. A good wrestling show should last as long as a movie.
Yeah, we were like 2, maybe 2.5. If the crowd's really pumped, and we know we've got 2 workers that are going to come out and just try to tear the roof off. I mean, when we did the when we did the Shelby County Fair, the actual promoter was like, no, we have to get names in. We have to get names. So we got Colt Cabana and Jimmy Jacobs. 2 very good workers, right? And by the time we got to them, it was dark. He had not prepared. He said, oh, yeah, they're going to turn on the stadium lights for us. They didn't. So they were kind of wrestling in half darkness. And you could literally hear them calling their fucking moves. And I'm just like, wait a minute. Aren't you guys supposed to be the pros here? Aren't you supposed to be the big draws?
But I'm a firm believer though. If a match happens during the show, it is not a pre-show match.
Yeah.
That's just my thought. I will always believe that. I don't care if it starts 10 minutes earlier. I don't care. It's still part of the show. And I'm sure WWE says that, but I still don't agree. But you know, here's an interesting thing, and I'm sure you know, but I'm not going to drop a name because it's not necessary. You know that during the Roger Cox Memorial Show, you know 2 guys were booked as a tag team, and Roger, probably the first attention these guys ever got was through UCW, and they while everybody else put the night aside, like 2 days beforehand, they chose to go work a show in Indiana.
Wow.
For a payday. Yeah. You know. I never forgot that, and I'm not going to ever forget it. I'm not so sure that was exactly the right thing to do. You know, of course, then you had another guy on the show that insisted on putting himself over in the Battle Royal. You know, that was his own call, which he had no rights to make any calls. Yeah, but that's just what you run into in the business. Yeah, you deal with the attitude. You know, it's just like that guy out there right now, who I don't know what to think about the guy, where he does the dick flip and all that.
Yeah, Joey Ryan.
Joey Ryan. Yeah, I'm just like, you know, in some aspects I understand it because the crowd fucking loves it and he draws. And in other aspects, I'm just like, dude, that is not pro wrestling.
PWG did that one gimmick with the Phantom hand grenade. I mean, there's some really dumb stuff there, and I know the Young Bucks did that one spot where they super kicked a 6-year-old girl. I mean, of course she was in on it, but still, that's dumb. I don't know. When's the last time you've ever seen a good Broadway?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things in wrestling that's kind of gone by the wayside because they consider it more TV entertainment than actually an athletic competition. The one thing that I really like about AEW is that they have never once uttered the phrase sports entertainment. Anybody who comes out to the ring is a wrestler.
All right.
Okay. Okay, supposedly that we are live again.
Live. Test.
And
but good.
And honestly, I forget where we're at because we have a tendency to.
I got one. I got one for you. So here's the thing I was telling some of these new school guys. You know, Ricky Morton said it a couple years ago, and I always like to give Ricky Morton credit for this when I say this. He says, you know, there is no new school or old school. It's the right way and the wrong way. And that's the truth. You know, I had a couple of really young guys, 18-year-old guys here, probably within the last year, and they were just starting to train, and one of the guys that was training them, I asked the kid, I was like, hey, what did you learn the other day in training? He goes, I learned how to do a missile drop kick off the top rope. And I'm like, how many training sessions have you been to? Oh, 2 or 3. That comes like training session 53. That's not training session 2 or 3. If you're going to be a trainer in this business, you start out with learning how to take bumps. You start out with learning how to lock up. Yeah, you start out with headlocks and headlock takeovers.
Yeah, do a week of flatbacks and running the ropes.
Absolutely. I used to have, and my girls used to laugh at me when I was training them one-on-one, I would literally make them stand on the bottom rope and try not to touch the top rope, even though I knew they were going to do it anyway, and walk it all the way around the ring. And they never could figure it out. They was like, why are we doing this? It's stupid. I go, it's good for balance. They're like, you've been watching too much Rocky. I'm like, you're right, I have. But do it anyway. You know, doing conventional things, do something different. But here's what happened. So these two young guys are in there, and I said, I know that you guys are very limited on what you can do. But from knowing how many times you guys have been to training, let me see 5 minutes. And I said, I don't even care if one shows that they're the face or the heel. I don't even care about that. Show me 5 minutes. Within about 2 minutes, they had done everything they knew how to do. And I said, now can I show you 5 minutes? And they're like, sure. I was like, okay, you circle, ring approach, whatever you want to call it, lock up, do a little struggle. One shoves the other one off. Okay, circle again, lock back up. Usually the heel backs the baby face the baby face backs the heel into the corner. Okay? The heel's yelling, hey, he pulled my hair, he pulled my hair, he pulled my hair. That number. They circle again. Well, this time the heel backs the baby face. And you reverse it, then you stop that, and then you lock up again. Headlock takeover, back up, hammer lock, reverse it a few times, maybe go to a top wrist lock, maybe back to a headlock takeover again, back up, shoot off, shoulder tackle, boom. Just simple stuff like that. Work into, doing a couple duck clotheslines, cross body, fucking drop kick, or hip toss, arm drag, drop kick, whatever. How long is that going to happen and last until Chimera wants to get in his pockets?
Yeah, honestly, I like Ben.
I do too.
I think he's a decent worker. He stiffed me once because he was because he hurt his ankle or something and he couldn't wrestle. And I was like, just show up so we can start setting up the angles for next month. And he didn't think it was worth his time, so he didn't show.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, I'll take care of the story part. All the shit outside the ring, I can help you with that. You guys are Lord and Master when you're inside the ring. This is the only thing I want as far as the finish. Here's who goes over, and here's what I'd like the finish to be. Get as close to this as you can.
Right.
And I've had a couple of guys stand up to me and like start to puff their chest out, and I was like, okay, I'm the booker. You want to throw a punch? Throw a punch. Let's go.
All right.
If you want to be a bad man, throw it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're back. But yeah,
it's just simple philosophy. Yeah, psychology. Guys need to learn to slow down. An old thing that Al Snow told me a long time ago, and I'm name dropping Al Snow, but I have a right to. He trained me, so I can do it. So the one thing, and I don't think I'm fast by any means, but Al used to tell me all the time that I was going too fast, and he used to tell me that if you think you're going too slow, then slow it down a little more.
Yeah.
If you think about it, it makes sense.
It does.
You don't have to go 1,000,000 miles an hour in there. And being a bigger guy, a lot of these little guys got it wrong when they wrestle a big guy. They think that the big guy's supposed to keep up with them. No. You got to control yourself and dial it down a little bit to stay with the big guy. We had that happen on one of my shows back in 2007 during a Randy Kirby Memorial Tag Team, which we did a legitimate flip for it, and me and my partner won. And I'm not going to say the guys' names, but they didn't want to wrestle because I was bigger than them. And when they got tagged in, they literally dropped to the floor and left. Yeah, they didn't want to be a part of the match at that point. And I just thought,
I don't understand that at all.
That's unprofessional.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially guys that had never worked against me before. But, they knew me. But it's like, that's just unprofessional. If you can't be professional with everybody, then don't be in the business. That's just like, I can get guys from Legends of the Squared Circle to vouch for this. Ryan Freeman would actually be one to tell you that in the last year or so, I'm not going to say I do it every time because I got a lot of physical issues right now, but Ryan Freeman one night literally had to grab a hold of me and pick me up and move me out of the way because I was helping tear down the ring. Ryan's like, "What are you doing?" I go, "Dude, in this business, you never get done paying dues. I'm not beyond tearing down a ring. Bobby Fulton still tears down a ring, his own ring. He still tears it down. He's like 57 years old or 58. You're never bigger than the business."
I tell you, I got pissed one night. We were doing an IPWA thing, and it was the Madness. I won't give his full name, but you know who he is.
Yeah.
He was like, "Well, I hurt my leg during the match," and I'm like, "You know what? I'm an old man, and I'm helping tear down the ring. Don't be a pussy." And
right.
and he just looked at me. He's like, "Oh, what do you know?" And I'm like, "I know enough to where you can help lift these rails and put them in the truck."
Right.
Because I can't, but I can help disassemble everything. So
right.
At that time for them, I was just their camera guy.
Right.
Yeah, and helping those guys lay down promos and shoot their promos. And I'm just like, if I can do this, anybody can do it. If you love what you're doing and you care about the organization that you're in and you're investing your time, when you're not like running stock at the IGA, if this is something that you're really into, you should be willing to go the extra mile. Not like the guys who show up like 10 minutes before bell time and then leave right after their match.
Yep. And still want paid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel, and if the same Madness guy, he was on a Bobby Fulton show a few years ago.
And, attitudes like that's as far as he's going to get in the business.
Have you ever watched any of Bobby's son's matches?
Oh, we're back. No, I haven't. I haven't been able to see it. He was supposed to, Bobby was supposed to come on, but he couldn't figure out how to do Google Hangouts, and he got really pissed at me. And then I asked him 24 hours. He's like, "No, I don't think we're going to do it." So I went ahead and booked somebody else, and he literally calls me when I'm 5 minutes into the show. He's like, "Okay, we're ready to come on," and I'm like, "That's nice. I'll be happy to book you some other time."
Right.
And he spent like another 5 minutes going off on me on the phone while I was doing an interview.
Right.
I'm sorry. I don't think I need to teach you etiquette on this part.
Right. But like I say, man, this business is just, it's a cutthroat business. You try to build yourself up a good reputation over the years, and messing with the wrong people can ruin your reputation in no time. You know, I mean, I've been accused of stuff that's not true. Just I don't know. You just gotta. It's kind of like in this business. It's kind of like the business and my life are kind of like the same. You just have to kind of be a loner, and do what you do every day, and not get your feet too dirty. It's just I wouldn't trade the world for anything I've ever done. I pride myself on saying that I don't believe I ever hurt anybody in the ring. You know, where guys nowadays are trying to be headhunters. That's not what the business was built on. Back in the old days, yeah, they did have, you know, shooters or hookers, as they were called, that if a guy was, you know, really a troublemaker, they would send somebody in there. You know, and that's a lot of the reasons why Buddy Rogers, you know, kept putting off wrestling Lou Thez, because Thez was a legitimate hooker.
Oh yeah.
You know, I think if I'm not mistaken, at one time they sent Thez to win the title from him because he was refusing to give up the title, and so they sent him in there to take the title. You know, and I mean that does happen. I mean, you do have guys in this business that are, you know, that are legit. You know, so like I said earlier about Dan Severn, nicest guy you ever want to meet. Probably one of the toughest guys too. You know, and these guys are not street fighters; they're legitimate fighters. You know, so I mean that's just what you have in this business.
Yeah, I mean, like we were saying before, when we were off air, they've forgotten the stories, and all they want to do are the spots.
Yep.
I mean, I know Randy Savage was meticulous about his matches.
Right, he built up to the big leap off the top and shit.
Which,
yeah, if he went out there and did it all the time, nobody'd care.
Yeah, it was essentially another kind of overkill.
Right.
But
what people got to remember in the business when you're a wrestler, because I hate the word workers, by the way, but
really?
When you're a wrestler, you have to think, if you're going out there and you're going 100 miles a minute out there, which a lot of these young guys do now this is just my perspective, okay? I'm guessing that the average fan, if you go out there and you did 5 moves in a row and you really don't get a response for about 4 seconds after you do it, or 5, the reason for that is because it took the crowd that long to pick up on what you just did. The crowd cannot follow what you're doing that quick. They're still on the first move when you just did the 5th move. The 5th high spot or the flip-flop spot. And I firmly believe that.
Well, yeah. Well, and it's like when you go with traditional chain wrestling, and you've got 4, 5, 6 moves together. After you're done with that 4, 5, or 6 moves, you got to pause.
Right.
So
yeah, you got to do like a standoff or something.
Yeah. Like let them catch their breath.
Right.
You know, it can't be spot.
Yeah, Japan loves that shit. Yeah. They can follow that, but they can't follow the other stuff.
I kind of like chain wrestling too. I mean, I like I like the luchador style a little bit better.
Right.
Because you see them setting the spots, you know they're going to run with it, but they are going to stop.
All right.
And they're going to give you the time to take that breath to continue on in the story. That's kind of like what I like about AEW, because they did a lot of, here's some backstory that they put out as like video logs. But when they got to the wrestling, there really wasn't a lot of jawing. It was just straight up, we're wrestling now.
All right.
And doing 20, 30-minute matches.
Right.
And honestly, it's kind of odd that people still want to encapsulate it, break it down. Give me 5 or 6 minutes. And I think wrestling fans have a better attention span.
Right.
Than they're given credit for.
Right.
But now, I know we're at the top of the hour again, but I did want to ask, what was your favorite match of all time that you were in?
I don't know if I could pinpoint that to one match. It was like the ones that stick out the most for me, it was either, I wrestled my trainer up in Michigan. We did a basic, what they call headlock match. We did a thing where he's chasing me on the outside of the ring, and the last thing he said to me was, keep running. So I keep running around the ring, and he's sitting in the top of the bleachers. Yeah, and everybody's laughing at me. Yeah, which was a funny spot. Yeah, it was really cool. Of course, I was blowing up like crazy. Finished me off with a power bomb. And then you have me versus Ken Patera in Circleville, Ohio. Of course, Ken had hip replacement surgery, so I had to be careful with him. He took it on the outside of the ring, threw some chairs at me. Of course, they were way above my head. I got him in, or he had me, how was that? Somehow or another, either I had him or he had me in the full Nelson. I can't remember which way it was now. And Wimpy was going to throw the cane, but Wimpy decided to swing it. I must have had Ken Patera in the full Nelson. And Ken ducked out of it, and Wimpy hits me, and I get rolled up. 2 or 3 times I worked Honky Tonk Man in tag matches. They were always good. 2 or 3 times I worked Tommy Rich. They were always good. The Bobby Fulton matches, I always enjoyed those. Even though they were long matches, I always learned a lot in the matches.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't care to work for half hour, 45 minutes if I'm learning something. Just about any of them guys I ever wrestled were good learning experiences. I really wish that I could have another match with Roger Cox. Of course, he passed on in 2013, and that'll never ever happen. But me and him we joked around about it at one time and figured we'd had several hundred matches against each other. And he used to laugh about it. He had a great attitude about it. That every time we would go wrestle for Bull, it'd always be me against Roger. And I think out of the probably 30 times we wrestled each other for Bull, Roger never won, not one time. I begged Bull to let Roger win, and he just wouldn't put him over on me. And Roger would always say it was because he was black. And then he would laugh about it. He didn't care. He developed I kind of trained him along the way, so he didn't care. He knew what the business was. He didn't take it serious. I mean, he took the business serious, but he knew it had nothing to do with him being black.
Well, it was funny. Every time that I went to the show, a show didn't make a difference who was putting it on, and Roger was there. He'd be like, "Hey, come over here and sit by me."
Right.
He'd have a couple of his family with him, but he'd always want me to sit close so he could lean in and just say something, or either he was dogging somebody out or he was trying to explain to me, yeah, I appreciate this move.
It was always fun to sit beside him because he would be like, "What the hell was that?" But it was like, I tell you what, I was telling his sister Robin the other day. I said, "There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about him. Not a day." It was. I think it was about as close as 2 people can get. Yeah, we thought a lot about the same things, and he wasn't that. I don't want to say typical. That's not fair. He wasn't that black guy that had a chip on his shoulder about being black.
Well,
he told me one time. He said, "Maniac, we were talking about this," and he didn't like to talk about it. He says, "Maniac, my family never had enough money to be in Africa, so I know they didn't come over." He goes, "I don't get into that stuff." And it's like, we never argued about stuff like that. There was no need to, because, his family, I've got my own family, but we really don't do a lot of get-togethers and stuff. But I can remember, I don't know how many times I would go over there to Metro Park for July 4th or any of them holidays, and I'd be the only white guy in the whole place. It never bothered me. You know, you go to his mom's house, and she would have pictures of all the kids on the wall, and she'd have one of me on there. And they would always ask, she said her friends would always ask her, who's this? And she'd say, that's my other son. He's just a little light-skinned, you know. But it was like, I would give anything in the world to have just one more day, you know. But that'll never happen. So,
well, the one telling thing that really just kind of won me over with Roger was, he's like, when you look at me, what do you see? And I'm like, I didn't have an answer for him. He was like, he was like, the first word that should come out of your mouth is a wrestler.
Right.
If that doesn't come out, you just say a man.
Right.
Because black is just the color of my skin.
All right.
You know.
He would also tell you, he'd say, I'm not a great wrestler, but I'm a hell of an entertainer. And he would entertain. Oh, ain't no doubt about that. He was an entertainer.
Dude, I always used to come back, and when it's like, okay, it's time to shoot promos, there were two people that I would look for because I knew they would be quick, in and out, easy promos. Him and Sheiky.
All right.
Because they would get, I'm like, you guys know what I want on this. You know where you need to go. Action.
Right.
And they would tear it down. He was an incredibly smart guy and a very kind soul.
All right. Absolutely. Like I say, it's one guy gone way too long. Way too soon. I mean, way too soon.
Well,
but
last time I saw him, he was at one of the 1CW shows.
All right.
And I'm like, hey, how you feeling? He's like, that dialysis, man. And I'm like, I'm like, I don't know what I can do, but it was kind of nice to see it. And I definitely want your opinion on this because, like, when you know there's a wrestler who has who's paid their dues, if you go to the proper show, you will see all the greenies gather around him.
All right.
And hold court. I've seen you do that. I've seen Roger do that.
All right.
Is that gone? Is that a thing of the past?
I think it is right now because it's like I think I mentioned it earlier. Most of these young guys just don't want to know anything. They think they're doing right by what they're doing, and they don't want to pick guys' brains. You know, they just don't. You know, and I mean, you know, I was never like, let's say, a well-known across the country superstar, but you know, I'd been in locker rooms when, like at 1CW, Jimmy Jacobs comes in and he goes, "Me and you know each other, right?" You know. I don't think I'd ever met Jimmy before that.
There were people that were technically there for the right reasons.
Right.
But, okay.
So you knew it was the Chris brothers I was talking about.
Oh, we're live. Yeah, I do know.
That's all right.
I do know because somebody came to me and they're going, yeah, can you believe this, blah, 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 and this and that. And I was like, yeah, I can believe it.
All right.
Because, you know, that was a time when they were just getting into JCW.
All right.
But yeah,
you know, Violet J was in Dayton last night.
Oh, was he?
He was over at the Hole in the Wall, I guess, in the Oregon district. Him and Samantha Heights were over there playing that WrestleMania game.
Huh.
I guess that's like an arcade bar or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, she posted a picture of it on her Facebook. I thought that was pretty neat.
That's funny because, well, no, I'm not going to talk about everything that I've heard about Jay right now. I know. Let's just say Shags is doing okay. Jay is not.
Right.
But Yeah, I've been making phone calls to try to get them on, and they thus far have not been too receptive with it. So let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and wrap this down before we crash and burn again.
Right.
I've always said that the people that I bring on help to embody what I call flexing your pec, which is PEC's an acronym for having passion for what you do, making the effort to do it, and being committed to see your way through it, whether it's a victory or a failure. Can you apply that to yourself?
I mean, I've always, as far as the wrestling goes, I mean, I've always had the passion, for that, and it's like, but to be honest with you, I don't think at this point in time, I don't really have that passion anymore, and a lot of that, honestly, has been brought on from, just like we were talking there a few minutes ago about, the holding court and all that stuff, and it just. Let's just say this: most of these young guys have made this business very, very, very uncomfortable for me personally. Man. Just because I don't feel the love for it like that anymore. I go to LSC shows, but honestly, and they'll be the first ones to tell you, their show starts at 7. I'm there about 8 o'clock, about 9:30, I'm gone. Yeah, I just don't. And I mean, they're a bunch of good guys, and they put on a great show. It's just, I've gotten to that point to where I feel, and I've made this statement many a times in the last year or so, that the business has passed me by, and I have no desire to change the way I feel about the business. As far as the kayfabe and, everybody's like, you got to let that shit go. I can't do that. There's a girl in particular, let's just say in the tri-state area, that every time she wrestles a show, and she's not bad, I don't think she's the best, but she's not bad, but every time she wrestles a show, when she's at the show, she either videos her and her opponent together goofing off, or she posts a picture of her and her opponent together. And I've let it be known to that promotion that, hey, you shouldn't do that. And they're like, oh, that doesn't happen at our shows. And it's like, well, you need to look at the picture because it is at your show. And it's like, that's just, maybe I'm the dumbass for still believing,
Yeah. Well,
but I'm just not going to.
Well, and
I'm not going to give in.
Well, and here's one of the things that I know we were kind of talking about. There's somebody online right now that's promoting about being a wrestler, and one of the first things that I said to him is that wrestling, especially at the independent level, at the dirt mall level, which is the level that he's at, is you have to have definitive good guys and bad guys. Right. I know one of the words that you hate the most is tweener. Right. How do you get that attitude to change? Because Stone Cold Steve Austin is in the vernacular now. People who are not into wrestling know that name because he was the anti-hero. He was the tweener. He could be a good guy or a bad guy. How is that detrimental when you're getting down to local grassroots wrestling?
Well, even with Stone Cold, I don't exactly think that's a tweener. I think that he was coming out and being a heel, and the crowd just loved him being a heel. Mm-hmm. The guys, the local guys, man, they're not even close to being on any kind of level like that. I mean, your first thing when you come through that curtain is you got to make the fans decide or know. You got to feed the fans as you go. Yeah. If you come out and you're slapping hands with the fans, then you're a babyface, right?
Yep.
But I've seen it on so many shows. The guy will come out, he's slapping hands. I'm like, he's the babyface. The next guy comes out that he's working against, he's slapping hands. Then I know that there's going to be a shitty fucking match right there. Because it's the truth, because neither one of them know who the face is or the heel. No, and then they'll get in there and they'll start doing their shit, and all of a sudden, one of them's the heel. I'm like, okay, they've established who the heel is. And then all of a sudden, 2 minutes later, if the match is still going that long, the guy who I thought was the face is now the heel. You can't do that. You cannot do that in a match.
Well,
that's why it looks like shit.
And I used to do the simple thing, like when there was intermission, if you're coming out, and you're a heel, do not be humble about shit. Do not say thank you.
Right.
You are a heel.
Right.
Anybody who comes up is like, oh, right. I loved your match. You were great. You'd say something like, yeah, I know. Or like,
say,
hey,
buy a picture or buy a shirt.
Yeah, or like somebody comes up, because I used to do those photo cards for them. Those 8x5 or what is 5x7? Yeah. I used to do the 5x7 photo cards, right. And I even had one guy do the gimmick of somebody came up with one of the cards, and he was like, "Why are you buying this crap?" and rip it in half and just throw it over his shoulder and walk away.
Right.
And
and then,
excuse me, damned if that kid didn't pick up the two pieces. And we're like, great.
Right.
Because he's going to take it back home and tape it together.
Right. It's just like, I used to think that Smoky Mountain was probably the smartest on this. And I think up to then, I probably never really thought about it, honestly. And I seen them do it, and it worked. When the doors would open, the heels would be on one side of the gym and the faces on the other. They may yell back and forth at each other, but they were on opposite sides. And, a lot of promoters will tell you that, hey, you're a heel, you can't be out there. Well, the problem with that is, and old school dictates that, but there again, just like you said, as long as you can play your gimmick up and be the dick that you're supposed to be, then you're probably all right, because you got to remember, if that's the case, I would just want to be a face all the time because I can sell merch. Yeah. You gotta let your heel sell merch too, because he needs to make money too.
Oh yeah.
So, but you keep them on opposite sides of the fucking building, and let them, play their gimmick out, and I'm fine with that.
And at the fairgrounds, they had two entrances to where the guys would change. And I literally would say, okay, the heels go in this door, the faces go in this door. If you're going out to take a smoke, you go out the same door. If you guys want to gather together in a cluster, if you're a bunch of heels, I don't care. Because you are the bad guys. You will associate with each other. Figure it out, people, because I'm not saying that the audience has a simplistic nature, but when you don't have television to where you can pimp everything out, to where they can follow a storyline, you have to make it that simplistic so people understand.
Right. Well, it's kind of like where I went to school at in Waynesville. It's the neatest I know in the one gym it was that way, and probably in both of them now. But there's a high school gym, and then there's a new high school gym. And I think they built both of them kind of the same. But the dressing rooms, of course, you got a boys and a girls, but the training room is in between. So whenever we would do shows there, what they would do is, you could be in the heel dressing room, but they would leave the training room door open, so you could pass through, and go over and talk to each other. Then I'd been a lot of dressing rooms I was talking about earlier about being in Manchester, Ohio. The dressing rooms were downstairs, but the problem was there was nothing connecting the two. So, in other words, you're in there, and I like I say, at one time I worked Danny Two Rivers. The next time I worked Ron Cumberledge. Ron Cumberledge used to be a really decent name in Ohio, out of Cleveland, until he'd done a lot of jobs for WWE until I think he got busted for steroids is what happened to him. And they kind of dropped him after that, but he was a real big black guy, nice guy. But so here I am. Ron Cumberledge don't know me. I don't really know him, and you go out there and you walk and talk. And so many people don't, like I said earlier, they don't know how to walk and talk. They just know how to, hey, let's do this and this and this. And then when the crowd's not buying it, you keep going for your 10 to 12 minutes, and you fucking just stunk up the whole place because you didn't want to break from what you were doing. Because nobody wants to be what I consider the ring general and be like, no, this ain't fucking working, we're changing this. And as the heel, when you go to change it, you just start beating the shit out of the guy. And then go from there. So.
Well, I think, that since the independents don't have the television or pay-per-view support, it really needs to go back to that territorial thing. Right. But I tell you what, before we crash and burn again, you've been incredibly generous with your time. I would like to go ahead also and promote. If you want to know more about Mark, you can always go onto the Facebook. There is the Maniac Championship Wrestling official page as well. If you guys like what I'm doing, even through the technical difficulties, my Twitter's down there. I've got a Streamlabs, a Patreon, and of course the TeePublic store. But of course, at the very bottom of the descriptor is my prescription for additional entertainment. These are people that I like to watch when I'm not broadcasting. And I heartily recommend that you all look them up and see if it's something that you'd like too. As far as the show goes, we do have coming up next week. We'll be interviewing Irate Prostate. Then the week after that, we'll be interviewing another wrestler, another legend, Tracy Smothers. We'll also be talking with Full Metal Pickle, and to round out the month, we'll be talking to professional piano bar singer Kelly Johnson. So, Maniac, I'd love to thank you for being on this evening. We appreciate you.
Not a problem, my brother. Anytime.
And I'd like to thank everybody who was out in the chat and being vocal. We certainly enjoy that as well. And this has been a great show for me. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And there's only one thing left to say. The doctor's office is closed. Uh-oh.
It was all good. It was all good. It was all good, little brother.
Yeah, I had a fun time. Although it's weird because... here, wait, let me...